And we're live. There we go. So, if you have a cup of coffee, you can join me. My coffee is aptly in a cup that I received from one of our listeners, the House of Dragon. Welcome to the House of Dragon. So, great morning, everybody. We're going to start in just a second. Very, very good to see you. Um, I don't know what everybody here's thoughts are about sleep, but I have some interesting thoughts about sleep. On a health basis, I know that it's important, nature's nurse, and there's a lot of studies to show how important it is. But, in the spirit of what we do on this in our podcast and in most of the work, the idea of reframing things, because sometimes you don't get sleep. I didn't get sleep last night. I just had so many creative ideas and I stayed up. I was up since about 2. Got a lot of work done, but I didn't get some sleep. So you have to reframe that, or else you'll be a victim all day of like this. I didn't get enough sleep. So I'd love to hear some of your comments on, what your thoughts about sleep are. Because I used to say plenty of time to sleep when you die, and all of that stuff. But my reframe with sleep is um, an important step that I take sometimes in the morning when I don't get sleep, because I have to turn it into a positive. And the reason why I didn't get sleep last night is not because I was a victim of circumstance. It was because there was something that I wanted to do more that was more important than sleep, right? So that's what I convinced myself this morning. So I did a lot of writing and I'm trying to finish my book because we're launching it in February of next year. So there's a lot of steps to that. So anyway, I don't know what your thoughts are on sleep. But great morning, friends. As some of you know, my name is Dr. JC Dornick. I'm your friendly neighborhood dragon. And this is the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, where confusion dies and progress thrives. So if you're new here, Make Sense is not just a podcast, right? It's a movement of sorts. It's a way of changing the way that we see the world through the lens of things like awareness, perception, and conscious creation. We're gonna utilize those things here. A very big part of what we do here is we help people do what most humans are struggling to do right now, and that is to think for themselves. We're in an overstimulated world that's doing most of the thinking for us and creating problems like our topic today called imposter syndrome. So if you're new here, this is not just a podcast, right? We're taking a deep dive into this other realm. But while you're with me today, you're going to be in the neocortex, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that you actually control. And you're going to think, because I'm going to give you some things to think about. So that's the main value of our time today. We're only together for about 30 minutes is you're going to have the opportunity to think. Now, this episode will be on our podcast probably next week. So if there's any engagement, any really breakthrough questions or anything like that, I will give you a shout out. I'm going to be shouting out some Substackers today for sure because they motivated me. So if you enjoy conversations like this, and want to deep dive a little bit more, I encourage you to reach out and consider exploring or joining what we call the Make Sense Academy. That's our sense making community, and that's like a psychological safe haven that I've created where we foster things like growth, self development, mentorship, coaching, and connection. I've taken everything that I've done. I'm 54 and I've coached thousands of people and I've done a lot of interesting things. I've put it all under one roof for less money than you'll probably spend on food over the next couple of days. So inside, you'll find things like courses, live masterminds, and practical tools to help you filter out the noise and tune back into that home base of you that we call the signal. So you can learn more by direct messaging me. That's the way I like to do it. You'll always get access to it through my Substack, but you can direct message me the words make sense. Not here on the live show. Just send me a direct message through Substack or social media platforms or anything like that. And I'll send you some information and you can take a little free trial of it. So, all right, let's make sense of imposter syndrome. And I just want to give some credit to the amazing Tracy Edwards, along with Mark Willis. They're the ones that inspired me to talk about imposter syndrome. And here on Substack, very often we do some collaborations. So after reading Tracy Edwards', what was it called? Let's Get Unstuck. Substack is the name of her Substack. She wrote something on imposter syndrome. And I don't know, sometimes when you read something that you guys write on Substack, it just kind of stirs me. Just like I'm reading a book. If I read a book, even if it's a great book or not a not so great book, something inside of it usually stirs me. Do you understand what I'm saying when I said that? So it reminded me that this voice that, you know, lives inside our head, this voice, is not something that lives quietly in a one bedroom apartment inside our heads, this negative voice. It's actually something that the world is amplifying and using like a megaphone to amplify the feeds of things like opinions, expectations, and we just seem to not be able to avoid them. And I say that because in our house, we kind of avoid TV and news and doom scrolling and things like that, but we still find out about stuff. So this idea of this voice that is giving you this imposter syndrome. It doesn't live in a one bedroom apartment, right? It's quietly in your mind. It's being amplified everywhere. So be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for that today. And I just thought to myself, man, what a crazy world that my kids are growing up in, and I wonder what the future holds. So Tracy's words, as well as I said, some collaboration she did with the amazing Mark Willis, inspired me to make sense of my own, obviously differently. I'm going to look at the idea of imposter syndrome differently, but um, we're going to do it through something that I call noise dissociation. So that's going to be kind of like my offering and gift to you today is this concept called noise dissociation. So you can write that down maybe and put it in your pipe and smoke it. So this is how I've learned, this concept of noise dissociation, and it's very much correlated to the work I do with what's called the interface response system. This is how I've learned to step back, observe the noise of the world, which is where the problem is coming from, without feeling, excuse me, live edition, without feeling compelled to participate in the noise. There's this shift where you can just allow yourself to observe things, including the thoughts and feelings in your head, including the negativity you get from the outside in. You're allowed to just observe them and kind of like you're at a movie theater eating popcorn, right? As a movie, but not feel compelled to buy into them and participate with them. And what happens is that gives us the ability, the safe passage to, kind of return back to that clear signal of who I really am for the day. Because wouldn't you agree that we just get caught up in versions of ourselves that are not true to ourselves, and they can kind of hijack our day. So here it is. Here is my making sense of imposter syndrome. And what do we call this just for the podcast? We call this noise dissociation, the cure for imposter syndrome. And once again, inspired by Tracy Edwards and Mark Willis from Substack. Fantastic writers. Go check that out. So here's the way it began. I caught myself the other day. It was in the morning. And I was just staring at the glow of my phone. Have you ever done that? I was just staring at the glow of my phone, thumb scrolling on autopilot, and I just remember kind of smirking because the muscle under my thumb, it's called the thenar muscle, was hurting, and I thought it was funny, right? Have you ever like poked fun at your insanity? I was like, you're doing too much phone. That's silly. Honestly, to be completely transparent about this moment, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for on my phone, right? News, validation, maybe just something to feel that wasn't my responsibility, like something to feel other than my responsibility. I kind of caught myself. And that's part of the work that I do. It's okay to be doing silly things or thinking silly things, but you want to try to make it a point to identify them, right? It's called drifting and shifting, right? You have to catch your drift before you can shift. A lot of times people don't even take the time to recognize they're doing things. So I don't beat myself up when I catch myself doing stupid things. I say, oh, look at you. You're doing something stupid right now. So 10 minutes into this, those 10 minutes just vanished. And I don't think that I even took a conscious breath during those 10 minutes. Now, I knew I was breathing, but I wasn't aware of it. And here's where it hit me. And this is a big one. This is one you can take with you today. It struck me in that moment that I was searching for myself in the very noise that made me disappear. And in my Substack, I say, read that again. So I want to say it again. In that moment, I was looking to distract myself from myself, most likely. In that moment, I was searching for myself in the very noise and vortex that made me disappear. So, you want the definition of insanity? I was looking to like find something in a place that I was getting lost in, you know? So the noise of the world is louder than ever, isn't it? Right. And I'm not just talking about the sound aspect of it, I'm talking about the overstimulation. That's what I mean by the noise, right? And the opinions and the expectations and all that stuff. So every scroll, ping, and headline fractures our intention, or I'm sorry, fractures our attention into smaller and smaller pieces until our nervous system actually forgets what stillness even feels like. I see this very predominantly in children, but adults are experiencing this too, right? Our nervous system doesn't even know what stillness feels like because we're always doing something. We're always on our way somewhere. And I always say that we've lost the ability to just be bored. And it's interesting because when we're bored or we're wandering with our mind, that's where creativity is like really, really fertile. So we justify this kind of behavior by calling it being informed. You got to be informed, right? And I don't want to miss a thing, but it's more like we're sleepwalking, isn't it? Right? Our nervous system has been hijacked by notifications disguised as necessities. Notifications disguised as necessities. Have you ever disguised a notification as a necessity? You know, I looked at my Substack this morning and there was like over 100 notifications. And something in me told me that I had to go check them, right? Now I got to check them at some point because there's some great conversations in there, but it wasn't a necessity over my meditation or something like that. So we forget to ask who's actually calling the shots these days because we're not really sure that we're doing that too often these days, are we? Right? We probably want to stay away from that. Um, and what did I write? I said because we sure aren't doing it most of the time these days. So here's the reframe. So anything makes sense. My podcast, Make Sense Academy, my book, my Substack are always going to offer a reframe, but a reframe doesn't have to be just changing the way you're looking at something. It's also entertaining looking at it from a different perspective, which is kind of the same thing. So that's what I mean by reframe. So in psychology, the word dissociation is often seen as a defense mechanism. It's some sort of a retreat from consciousness, and it's there to kind of protect us from pain. Dissociation. It's actually a diagnosis, dissociated. It's not looked at as a good thing. But what if it had a higher form? You know, I thought about that and I was like, I haven't made up my mind. What if dissociation, I like taking words like selfish and overwhelmed and words that have negative connotations to them and reframing them into positive. So what if dissociation could become a conscious proactive practice not to escape life, but actually to reclaim it. So that's going to be my take on imposter syndrome. So this is what I call noise dissociation. I didn't make it up. Noise dissociation, which is a deliberate act of disconnecting from external noise that distorts perception and drags us out of presence. Noise dissociation. So this is when noise causes the dissociation. It's a deliberate act of disconnecting from external noise that distorts perception. So we're actually proactively recognizing the noise and dissociating from it, kind of like cognitive distancing, right? It's not a withdrawal from life. And this is one of the reasons people won't do it. It's like some form of quitting. It's not a withdrawal from life, it's a return to the space where truth resides. That's what makes it proactive. So when you practice noise dissociation, what you're doing is you're stepping away from distortion and reconnecting with what I call your signal, right? We're coming back to your signal, coming back home to the frequency of your awareness. You're just absolute just awareness before it's been persuaded and led in a certain way. So it's that frequency where things like awareness live, your values, your purpose that we very often forget because we get caught up, we get associated with the noise. And that signal, that frequency where these good things live are always broadcasting, but it's happening beneath the static. So you have to proactively take an approach. So let's just look at the science of noise a little bit here. There's so much interesting stuff. And it's really fun to call it noise because it's just noise. That's just noise, right? You can look at the thoughts in your head like that too. So neuroscience tells us that the brain is wired by repetition. Hebbian's theory says that neurons that fire together wire together. And that makes a lot of sense. If you do something with repetition, right? That's how you build a habit, good or bad. So we live in a constant state of unconscious reaction. So let's look at the behavior that we're doing with repetition. We live in a world where we're in a constant state of unconscious reaction, and that includes things like doom scrolling, unconsciously comparing and judging, and we strengthen the very networks that keep us anxious and distracted. So just take a pause there for a second and just acknowledge what you're doing with repetition. And remember, you might have wrapped it into a gift and called it necessity, but you'd have to stop and look at it and say, and not make your mind up about what you think about it first. But what we're doing with repetition, which is wiring our brains the way it is not always something that's in support of our goals and dreams. So one of my favorites, Dr. Joe Dispenza, we went to the same chiropractic school, calls this being wired for the environment. So are you wired for your environment right now? Think about that for a second. Being wired to this environment, knowing what we know about it, doesn't sound like an ideal setup for peace of mind, does it? So, Dispenza, he teaches that transformation begins when we transcend, kind of like bypass, right? We transcend and bypass the body, the environment, and even time itself, and we step away from those things, even if it's just temporary, right? And all of that sensory addiction that we're involved in right now, and you'd have to point it out. You might not know it until you say, all that sensory addiction of the world, and return to the seat of our creative consciousness. Think about what that means. By the way, I'd love to hear from some of you. If anybody has something to say about this stuff, because there's so many geniuses. Oh, I just realized there's a lot more people here. So great morning, Diary of a Relationship, my friend. Great morning, Lori. Great morning, Kalpana. Tango Pigeon. Oh, there's my mom coming in with a different name now. Ananya and Brady. Who else is here? Matthew Brownfield. Man, I got to tell you something. I do this stuff all the time, but I love when I recognize names, and I just really appreciate it. So Donna Wittenauer. Who else is here? So anyway, great to see everybody, and I appreciate you being here. Please, feel free to. I heard Archibald barking. Yeah, you did. That's great, Lori. Lori knows that we have a big 140 110-pound baby chocolate lab. So we're on the Joe Dispenza thing. Remember, when we do this for the podcast, we edit it down, and feel free to be part of the podcast if you have something interesting to say. Um, so he teaches us that transformation begins when we transcend and bypass the body, the environment, and even time itself, and we step away from the sensory addiction of the world and return to the seat of our creative consciousness. What would you need to do to return to the seat of your creative consciousness? You'd have to move away from the outside in persuasion, right? That place inside of you that is just doing the gazing and just is aware before your sense making machine that's programmed, right, from the repetition, starts telling that inside voice of yours what to see. I'm talking about going back to the seat of your own conscious creativity, where you decide before you're persuaded by all of that stuff. So each time you stop feeding the noise, because the noise is actually eating, it's consuming your energy. Each time you stop feeding the noise, you interrupt the old wiring, and it's a win. Each time, remember, because of the wiring, even though it's not done, you have to do this over and over and over. That's what repetition is all about. But each moment of silence that we capture becomes a small act of a rebellion. I love looking at self-development and personal growth as a rebellion against what? Our programmed and conditioned mind. Isn't that cool? So modern neuroscience backs this up 100%. I just got a high five, got a double high five from Diary of a Relationship Coach. I love that. So let's look at modern neuroscience, because it completely backs this up with some stuff you guys know about. So there's something called the default mode network that we all have, right? That's our baseline default mode network. And that's the circuitry that activates when we're not focused externally. That's the baseline, but it's been affected, right? It's responsible for things like your imagination, self-reflection, and construction of your identity, your default mode network. Now, whether it's a healthy one or not, that's where those things are being created. So if you're struggling with, your identity or your ability to be creative and self-reflect, you have a bad relationship with yourself, you probably have an unhealthy default mode network, meaning you've been doing some, ineffective, unsupportive things for quite some time. But your default mode network is the fertile soil where creativity and originality are actually meant to sprout, right? It's like the stem cells of your creativity. But remember, in this overstimulated world and with our overstimulated mind, that same network turns against us. Remember, we're talking about imposter syndrome here. We're going to get into that in a second. But what I'm talking about is what's upstream from it. You don't just you're not born with imposter syndrome, right? This is something that's being developed, and I'm just pointing out where. I like a proactive approach. So in this overstimulated mind of ours, the same network turns against us, looping endlessly through worry, doubt, and comparison. So feed that data into a large language model like human GPT, large language model of your own mind. And what it generates is, drum roll please, imposter syndrome. Now, that can show up in so many different ways. So I like to call it the imposter illusion. Here's why. Let me get a little House of Dragon coffee sip. That's what we get on the live show. I call it imposter illusion because it gives me the opportunity to acknowledge that it might be an illusion, right? Because if I say imposter syndrome, I embrace it. I like to call it imposter illusion because it says, maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about it. Maybe it's just a fugazi. Maybe it's just an illusion. Maybe it's a simulation, right? So imposter illusion. Noise is an all-you-can-eat buffet for the imposter syndrome. Think about what that is. Dig that framing. Yeah, I like that. Thanks, Stephen. Listen to what I just said. Noise is like an all-you-can-eat buffet for imposter syndrome. Meaning imposter syndrome requires noise. Get rid of the noise, there is no imposter syndrome. We're going to deep dive into that. So it's the byproduct of what's called noise association. The opposite of noise dissociation is noise association, or another way of saying that is noise, garbage outside, noise participation, right? So noise association, becoming so entangled with external feedback and expectations that we start mistaking them for our identity. We start mistaking external feedback and all of these expectations of the world, we start mistaking them as our own identity. Isn't that what an imposter syndrome is? Is you're letting these outside forces actually rewire your identity. That's not who you are. So the more we consume, right? I always say that which we consume with regularity becomes what we assume with regularity. The more we consume, the more the mind wires false beliefs. And it sounds like this: I'm not enough. I don't even like to say this out loud, but I'll do it for you. I'm not enough. I'm behind. I'm pretending, right? But imposter syndrome isn't proof of inact. But let me say this: this one's good. Imposter syndrome is not proof of inadequacy. It's evidence of disconnection. Now, just sit with that for a second, because in the heat of the moment, when you're having imposter syndrome, you're feeling inadequate. And believe me, I speak on big stages and I have some big events coming up. Even here right now, I have little glimpses of imposter syndrome. Like, why the hell would anybody want to listen to me? And, when my numbers go up in the podcast and, all of that stuff happens, I very often say, I don't know why, I was awarded a humanitarian of the year for all the work I did over in Haiti and stuff. And I just didn't know why. I thought they made a mistake. So that's imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is not proof of inadequacy. It's evidence of disconnection. Noise dissociation, by the way, which is the solution, does not fix the imposter. It exposes the illusion. This is why I call it imposter illusion. Noise dissociation exposes the illusion, the bullshit. So when you can observe the noise without obeying it, the voice of self-doubt begins to dissolve into what's always been, or into what it's always been, which I just said, an echo of something else with no source, no validity. It's like overhearing a conversation between two other people that has nothing to do with you. That's what you're hearing. And it's no different until you give it meaning. So we're going to call it imposter illusion. There's a little bit of a blessing. So you don't defeat imposter syndrome, by the way. You can't erase clouds from the sky, right? But what you can do is dissolve it by disconnecting from the frequency that created it. That's happening in your brain. By tuning out of that broadcast, right? And tuning back into your signal. This is why things like meditation are so valuable. This is why we have to protect our goals and dreams by removing flow burglars, energy suckers from our lives, right? Um, I had some guy the other day. I actually like adversity. So when people have like negative things to say, I enjoy just observing human behavior, and I have this canny way of not taking it personal. But I do have to be careful how much of that I expose myself to, because I'm human. Even though I'm a dragon, I'm a human dragon. So I saw this guy, comment just with a real racist anger. I mean, I could totally understand where this guy's coming from. Hurt people. But it was like really, really low and unnecessary, like 100 comments, beautiful, insights and everything. And here's this guy, right? So I had to cut him loose. I had to block him in my Substack, right? So we got to protect our goals and dreams. So let's put this into practice. For me, and this is crucial, because if you learning is another form of distraction in the absence of action, right? You're in a jacuzzi right now. There is an illusion right now that you're doing something because you're listening. And if you're making some kind of crucial discernments and insights right now, your brain is under the illusion that you're moving forward right now. You're not. You have to take action. So let's put this into practice. I said, for me, noise dissociation isn't just an idea, it's a ritual. It's ritualistic because I have to do it every day for the rest of my life. So every morning, before the world gets a chance to label me, right? And it starts when I crack my eyes open. I go from offline to online, and I have a whole process. I practice what's called the Great Morning Rise Up routine. Now, if anybody wants to get a copy of my Great Morning Rise Up routine, when I put the Substack out, which will probably be like in the next couple of days, there'll be a link there and you can get that or just ask for it. So I look at my morning routine. Get this, this is fun. I look at my morning routine not only as a protector of my goals and dreams, but I look at it as a fighter jet that deploys those flares to distract the heat sinking missiles that the enemy is shooting at it. Isn't that cool? So when I do my morning routine, I'm acknowledging that there's some heat sinking missiles of noise coming at me. So my morning routine is like this defense mechanism to make sure that they don't get in. So I protect my goals and dreams. And here's the butter on that roll. It's called meditation. And now my meditation of choice, which I'm getting certified in, is transcendental meditation. It's just what I vibe with. I don't know if there's any TM fans out there, but I've been doing that for a long time, twice a day, and I will not give that up for anything. If you ever hear that I didn't do my meditation, I most likely have died. So TM, Transcendental Meditation, is a simple, effortless technique that uses a silently repeated mantra to help the mind settle inward and access a state of deep rest and expanded awareness. By the way, I have a really cool basic, also you'll get it in the Substack, basic how-to of transcendental meditation. And I kind of do it a little bit different than the traditional way because I'm the dragon. But basically, this repeated mantra to help our minds settle inward and access a state of deep rest and expanded awareness. It's not about forcing silence, right? A lot of people don't think they're good at meditation. It's work. It's not about forcing silence. It's about transcending the noise. You're moving away from the noise. That's why I found TM because it was called transcendental. It just made sense to me. So as I focus on the mantra when I'm meditating, the chatter begins to dissolve. I forget about the chatter. Stephen says, closing in on 10 years, my man. Oh, when Stephen sits in his chair, he's not even sure he's like touching the chair. He could be like levitating above the chair. I love that, Stephen. He says, closing in on 10 years on TM, do like to mix it up, of course, right? Creativity and the seed of creativity with some visual free association. You know what's really cool, Stephen, is Jose Mind Silva, the mind control technique. I've taken my TM and melded it with that, the 3-finger touch and the alpha waves and all that stuff. So reach out to me if you want to have a jam session on that. I love to talk about meditation. I'll probably do a session on that one day. So as I focus on my mantra, the chatter dissolves. I drop into stillness, like sitting on the ocean floor, watching a movie screen that has nothing projected on it. That's kind of what I see. Calm, weightless, infinite. It makes no sense. This is what is so funny. I spend all of my waking time making sense of things. And great morning, Paul Iyugin. Iyugin. Welcome to the show. So I don't find that it makes sense, and I'm okay with it. It's the one time of the day or the 2 times a day I don't need things to make sense, right? So from that space, my nervous system resets. Now remember, we're talking about a proactive approach to deal with things like imposter syndrome. But what we're doing is we're going and attacking the upstream cause. We called it noise. right? Emotional mismanagement and noise. So from that space, my nervous system resets. My neocortex, that frontal part of my brain that I actually control, detaches during meditation, detaches from my subconscious influence, the lower level programmed, conditioned, programmed mind. It detaches from that influence and reclaims control, reclaims conscious control as the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of my mind. My heart synchronizes with my breath, and poof, shazam, I'm back online and tapped back into my signal. You might want to check that out, right? It makes no sense, right? Yeah, it's funny. Um, I'm really into, I'm working with plant medicine. I'm going to Machu Picchu at the end of November. Been doing that for about 5 years. I'm really into not needing to know, not needing to be right, and not needing things to make sense. So that's why, one of my phrases from my book that I teach people is, HMMN, which stands for haven't made my mind up about anything. There's something so freeing about not having made your mind up about something. I know that that's scary as hell, but is anything actually a fact, right? Who knows? That's another one. So the noise doesn't vanish, it just fades away into the background. My daughter would call this interpretation of noise what she calls in her gaming world an NPC, which stands for non player characters. Insignificant background figures that only gain power through the meaning that we give them. That's what noise is. Noise doesn't go away, but noise is irrelevant and insignificant until we make it significant. So when I do this, my signal returns to center, and it's clear, right? It's clean, and it's just lovely. It's just lovely. So that's where creativity begins, and that's where awareness feels like home. So let's talk about coming home. We're almost done. Maybe we're not trying to escape society. Maybe that's not what we're trying to do with all these distractions. Perhaps we're evolving out of a version of it that forgot how to listen. The noise association herd. That's what I'm trying to remove myself from. I'm trying to remove myself from the herd, the masses that are participating with the noise. That's why I wear these shirts very often. I'm wearing this because I was at Creative Con. I'm not Creative Con, at Comic Con. I actually went with the guy that started Comic Con, and it was amazing. Um, but just think about this for a second, right? I wear these shirts that say "Breaking news, I don't care." I want to let everybody know if they care about shit that doesn't matter. I want them to know I don't care. I don't know how you feel about that, but when somebody comes up to me with terrible news that I did not like, it's unsolicited, terrible news, giving, I just say, "Hey, I don't care." Right? And it's not that I don't care. I just don't care about shit that doesn't matter, shit that I don't control, all of that stuff. I don't know if anybody's with me on that. Bara says, "True." All right, cool. So noise dissociation isn't about silence for silence sake. It's about remembering who you are before and after the noise. Who are you before the perception of the noise? Who are you after it goes away? That's who you are. When you stop participating in the noise, you don't disappear, you reappear. Let me say that again. I get the chills when I said that. When you stop participating with the noise or the bullshit, you don't disappear, you reappear. As who? You. So, my final thoughts. Imposter syndrome is just a distorted self image trying to outshine your own personal truth. There's a delicious silence waiting behind that voice, and it's not absence, it's radical presence disguised as stillness. Practice being bored today. If you want an action step to move from the jacuzzi experience and make this stay pivotal and become the shot caller, a dominant force of your life, practice being bored today. Practice allowing yourself to have nothing to do, nothing to think about. I know you gotta get some stuff done, but take a little bit of that time, right? Not even meditate, just be bored. Somebody says, "What are you doing?" Say, "I'm just bored." And they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." No, no, no. I like it. So that's where your truth lives and where the next version of you is waiting to be released. So remember something, everybody. We're done, but remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. You know, the highest form of self actualization is when you take something you've been blessed with and you pay it forward and help mankind. But I want to thank everybody for taking your time to spend with me today. If this episode or these kind of conversations stirred something in you, if it helped you kind of pause and, you know, take a look at things, you know, with that prefrontal cortex from another, angle, and you see yourself a little bit clearer now, share it with somebody, guys, girls. Share it with somebody that might be wrestling with their own imposter syndrome, and you guys have a tool right now. So, if you'd like to go deeper, learning how to practice noise dissociation, strengthen your signal, and reclaim authorship of your life, I invite you to join, and I have a 7-day free trial of it. Join the Make Sense Academy. It's like getting high ticket business coaching and mentorship with everything that I've ever done and everything I will do in an environment with amazing people for less money per month than you will spend in the next 2 days on food. Why do I make it so cheap? Because it's a group format, and that way I can scale it rather than charge, 1,500, 2,000 bucks a month for coaching. So just direct message me, like I said, the words make sense. Like it's like putting the bat signal up there. Makes sense. And I'll give you access to this free trial. You can also read the full written version of this in my Substack, along with reflections, videos, and community discussions. And that'll be coming out soon. Until next time, stay aware, stay open, and stay curious. And remember, you're not the noise. You are not the noise. You are you. You're the signal, and you're a miracle. Have an amazing day. Love and appreciate you all. I'll see you next time.